Shalom Alaikum. Giving all praises, glory, and honor to our great, good, and terrible God, Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh, Yahweh, especially on the Sabbath day of Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh, Yahweh. That is according to Deuteronomy chapter 10 and verse 17, as well as in the book of Psalms, chapter 92. Also giving all praises, glory, and honor to the divine, beloved Son of Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh, Yahweh ben Yahweh, Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh Beth Sophie, Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh, of whom Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh Yahweh is well pleased. That is according to Matthew chapter 3 and verses 16 and 17. I thank and praise my Father Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh, Yahweh, for getting your attention of this post, as it led you during your surfing on Facebook to click on to the arrow and tune in to this recorded message. I pray that by you doing so is a form of evidence that your soul is probably surfing on Facebook and on the internet for a missing link in your life, or something that may aid your studies of the Bible, the King James Version Bible, while you are studying, according to 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 15. If so, then you are measured as one that means well in what you are doing on behalf of the fulfillment of prophecy. Some of that prophecy that can be found in the book of Judges, chapter 21 and verse 25, as well as in the book of Isaiah, chapter 29 and verses 10 through 24. Needless to say, should you take what you're about to hear in this testimonial video as merely a, quote, black man, a black unknown familiar face, in the quote, of someone that some of you may think you know, of whom perhaps is in search for, quote, fame, end of quote, or perhaps a few followers, or perhaps I'm recruiting for some members to join a religious coalition, then you would in fact be making a grave mistake. That is, especially if you are one that Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh, Yahweh, the Christ, spoke of, that is read today in the book of Luke, chapter 24, and verses 25 through 27. If you are, or if you are one that has posted biblical scriptures that are read on Facebook every single day, especially during your noticeably tireless efforts and spiritual communication with our people of Judah on Facebook and the people of the world that are reading Facebook and other communicative sources, then it is being highly suggested that you hear this message to the end. Nevertheless, I'm also being reminded to relate to you that there is an order of the Celestial Lodge that every living being on this planet must adhere to and obey. Now, the Bible references for this is found in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 40, as well as 1 Corinthians chapter 14 and verse 40. These two scriptures are to be read in that order. This now raises four questions as we begin this recorded video that are being directed to you. And those 4 questions are: 1, are you erudite? That's erudite. That's spelled E-R-U-D-I-T-E. Erudite. Are you? Well, while you are deliberating on that answer, here's question number 2. Have you been studying theology for the past 21 years that relates to the King James Version Holy Bible and the words that are found within? And as you deliberate on that question for an answer, here's question number 3. Are you approved by Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh, Yahweh, the God of the Bible? Well, if not, then finally here's question number 4. If your answers to numbers 1, 2, and 3 is, quote, yes, end of quote, then what proof do you have for others on earth to bear witness of your approval and your identity, that you have been approved of by Yahweh, Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh? And I'm not speaking on the pre-approval or the pre-approved, already confirmed, and the DVDs and messages that are taken from the archives of Yahweh ben Yahweh, or the annals that can be found, the annals that are being kept by other resources of Yahweh ben Yahweh, or what is already recorded and or said or even filmed of Yahweh ben Yahweh many, many years ago, that you share as remnants, a form of remnants on Facebook or over the internet. We're not speaking about those. I am referring to the proof that is already recorded in connection to your Hebrew name and your celestial soul that is connected to Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh Beth Nusafit, Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh Yahweh ben Yahweh, and that is connected to prophecy. So again, I repeat the question. The questions that are all conjoined now into one. And that is, are you erudite in results of at least 7 years of your study, or more years of your study, of the theological study that relates to the King James Version Holy Bible and the words that are found within, in so much until you have worked shamelessly and very hard of dividing the lies of Satan and his angels, his devils, from the truth of Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh, Yahweh, until you have now been approved by Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh, Yahweh, to bear witness and to testify of his divine Son, Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh Beth Nusafit, Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh Yahweh ben Yahweh. Well, have you? And if you think so, then what is your proof? What is the proof? Do you have proof for others to bear witness of your approval? And just for the record, there are 7 seals under the power and authority of the Celestial Lodge. 7 seals that were all sealed by Daniel. while he was in Babylon over 2,000 years ago. Reference the book of Daniel, chapter 12, and verses 1 through 4, should you care to read it. And after those very same 7 seals were sealed by Daniel, they were then loosed by the Son, Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh, Yahweh, Ben Yahweh, many years ago, right here in the United States of the Americas, over 2,000 years later. Now, the Bible reference for this is found in the book of Revelation, chapter 5, and verses 1 through 5. Now, with that said, what I'm about to share with you in this recorded testimony is extremely imperative for you to take deep consideration, to pay attention. So please do so. Pay close attention. Keep in mind that everything that has come and continues to come from my handwriting, from my indites, or by the voice of my mouth in care of our recorded testimonies and the indites that are given to me from Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh, even Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh, Beit Nusofit, Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh, Yahweh Ben Yahweh, which includes, quote, everything, end of quote, that I post on my Facebook timeline, does in fact come to pass. Well, for an example, on Sunday, July 14th, 2013, last year, and the results of the, quote, George Zimmerman acquittal, end of quote, of his infamous trial this past summer for the death that he was on trial for of a 17-year-old named, quote, Trayvon Martin, end of quote. I, my one soul, became extremely indignant because of that acquittal. I repeat, my soul and my mind became sore indignant because of a murderer who murdered an innocent young lion of the tribe of Judah, who was seen walking among the beasts of the forest in this country in a place called, quote, Sanford, Florida, end of quote. Even as a young lion who was merely kittling among the flocks of sheep, just as it says in the book of Micah, chapter 5 and verse 8, only to become a prey himself for the European hunters, those of Europe with guns, one who was set free from a law of justice. Nevertheless, and because I was sore indignant, I went into my closet, per se, and I faced the east in the dark, and I prayed to my master, Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh, Yahweh, in the name of the Son, Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh, Beit Nusofit, Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh. That is according to Matthew chapter 6 and verses 6 through 17. I prayed in both English and in Hebrew, and in accordance to Jeremiah chapter 17 and verses 17 and 18. And hours after I prayed to Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh, Yahweh, and as I was resting my body in my bed that night of July 13th, 2013, my master, Yud-Heh-Wav-Heh, Beit Nusofit, Yudhedwafe, Yahweh ben Yahweh, came into the depths of my mind, in my soul, where my indignation was sitting. And when he did, he told me these words, as I quote, "Fret not, my son." End of quote. And then he gave me my charge. Reference Jeremiah chapter 17 and verse 19. Even as I was instructed by Yudhedwafe, Yahweh, to obey his charge. And in that charge, Yudhedwafe Beth Nusafi, Yudhedwafe Yahweh ben Yahweh commanded me to post on my Facebook timeline of what Yudhedwafe Yahweh told me to announce to the earth and to all those of Judah, of his people, of his children, who were also concerned and in dismay because of the acquittal of, quote, George Zimmerman, end of quote. For thereby my father, Yudhedwafe Beth Nusafi, Yudhedwafe Yahweh ben Yahweh, told me in the depths of my mind during the early morning of July 14th, 2013, that, as I quote, Yudhedwafe Yahweh is jealous, and Yahweh revengeth, and is furious, and that Yudhedwafe Yahweh will take vengeance on his adversaries, and he reserveth wrath for his enemies. End of quote. And after he said that to me, I was commanded by Yudhedwafe Beth Nusafi, Yudhedwafe, to let all the earth know that, as I quote, Yudhedwafe Yahweh is slow to anger and great in power, and will not at all acquit the wicked, and that Yudhedwafe Yahweh hath his way in the whirlwind and in the storm, and the clouds are the dust of his feet. End of quote. That is, according to what he also said to his servant, known as Nahum, that can now be found printed in the book of Nahum in English, in the King James Authorized Version, Holy Bibles, the book of Nahum, chapter 1, and verses 2 and 3. And after Yudhedwafe Beth Nusafi, Yudhedwafe Yahweh ben Yahweh told me that, he then commanded me to let all those of concern know to be on watch for the sixth hurricane of the 2013 Atlantic formed hurricanes. Yahweh said to me, quote, "It is the sixth hurricane that you must look for, my son." I can remember that very plainly. He said, as I share with you in this video, it is the sixth hurricane that you must look for and watch and share with others, and post that on your Facebook timeline to share it with all the world for them to read and to see. And I did. I did just that. And many of you may remember back in July of 2013, last summer, that I posted that on Facebook. Many of you who are now Facebook alliances, you may remember that. I did that back on the early morning hours, as I often rise early in the morning. It was a Sunday morning, like today, July 14th, 2013. I even emailed a few of you in care of your private email addresses. You are my witnesses, and even ye are my witnesses to this truth. So go back and check your records on Facebook and check your emails if you hadn't deleted them, and confirm this truth for yourself. Share it with others. And then, after you do that, go back and check your records of October 2013, when the National Hurricane Center began monitoring a weak area of low pressure that was about 621 or 25 miles or so southeast of Bermuda, late on October the 20th, 2013. In fact, the National Hurricane Center said that it was an area of low pressure that they first said was not to be anticipated due to, quote, an unfavorable atmospheric condition, end of quote. However, and despite this prediction that was issued by them, the area of disturbed weather began to show signs of organization as shower and thunderstorm activity increased and became more organized. And 3 hours later, following an improving convective appearance on October 21st, 2013, weather advisories were initiated on Tropical Depression number 13 for their storm season of the Atlantic that began to start a tracking method of the National Hurricane Center. In fact, they began to track that storm that was headed north opposed to headed west from Africa, as they usually do that time of summer. Keeping in mind that the 13th Hebrew alphabet or character or symbol of the Hebraic idiom is known as Mem, spelled M-E-M, Mem. Nevertheless, this was the very first sign to the earth, beloved, to the earth from our Master, Yahweh, who art in heaven. That was a sign to the whole planet of his existence and his power, that we were not to be dismayed ourselves as his children of the sign. Reference Jeremiah chapter 10 and verse 2. This was a sign to the earth from Yahweh that the great prince that is now standing for the children of his people on earth, whose celestial name begins with Mem, the 13th Hebrew alphabet, who is now about to be proclaimed in the fulfillment of that prophecy, just like it is found printed in the King James Version Holy Bible, Book of Daniel, chapter 12 and verse 1, and the fulfillment of prophecy that is found on Facebook that very same Facebook timeline of Mika Yahweh, Sar Yahweh, of July 14th, 2013, that he is alive. It was also a message from Yahweh, Yudhid-Wavhe, the God of the Hebrews, at that same time in prophecy, was about to execute judgment for me. It was also my prayer, and perhaps some of you who may have also prayed. He was also executing judgment for you. At that same time in prophecy, Yudhid-Wavhe, Yahweh, was about to start the beginning of his judgment on all the wicked souls that he sealed in the fourth seal. Now, the fourth seal is a seal that was seen and written by Daniel. The fourth seal that was seen in symbolics by Daniel. The prophecy of words from Yudhid-Wavhe, Yahweh, to his servant that is being called Daniel the prophet. And you can read that and confirm it in the book of Daniel, chapter 7. That is now also found today in the book of Revelation, chapter 6, and verses 7 and 8. At that same time in prophecy on Monday, October 21st, 2013, Yudhid-Wavhe, Yahweh, was about to start the beginning of his judgment for Mem that was sealed and is now loosed with the Hebrew alphabet Yud. That's Mem Yud, to create in English M-Y, which is pronounced in Hebrew as me, spelled M-E or M-E-E, me. That fulfills another prophecy that was hidden in the book of Micah, chapter 7 and verse 9. Go and read that and confirm it for yourself. Nevertheless, that 13th depression of the Atlantic steadily intensified in a favorable upper air environment. That's a favorable upper air environment of intensity. Needless to say, by their storm rules, the National Hurricane Center have their rules that they use to govern their names every year, hurricane season. And according to their rules that they use for naming the storms, that are of course pre-named on the hurricane chart of the 2013 hurricane season, opposed to giving the 13th whirlwind, according to Nahum, chapter 1, or storm, that they call today a, quote, tropical depression, end of quote, of the 2013 hurricane season. The next name in line for 13 was pre-named Melissa, quote, Melissa, spelled Melissa, end of quote, Melissa. So instead of naming the 13th depression, or tropical depression by now, Melissa, the rulers of this world gave it the 13th, actually the 12th letter and it became known as, quote, Tropical Storm Lorenzo, end quote. Now you may be asking why. Well, because go back and recall that the eighth tropical depression that was formed in the Gulf of Mexico on September the 2nd, 2013, and shortly thereafter made landfall near Tampico, Mexico, and therefore never made enough wind speed to take on the next name in line, which was supposed to have been, quote, Lorenzo, end quote. And because of that, the name order was breached for the hurricane chart. Meanwhile, on October the 22nd, 2013, quote, Tropical Storm Lorenzo, end quote, began to peak winds of 50 miles per hour as a mid-level eye became visible on satellite, began to form an eye wall following peak intensity, and also wind shear of, quote, Tropical Storm Lorenzo, end quote, increased. That caused the low-level center to decouple from the deep convection. So, what does that mean? It means that on October 23rd, 2013, quote, Tropical Storm Lorenzo, end quote, weakened to a tropical depression, causing the system to lack the organization that is needed to be considered a tropical cyclone. This was the beginning of a, quote, surprise attack, end quote, of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yahweh, to, quote, sneak up, per se, end quote, on some of his enemies that was sealed in the fourth seal. That is, sneaking up on them without allowing them enough time to warn those of the land where the storm was headed, to prepare their doors and their windows, stock up on their food and flashlights and batteries and all the equipment that is needed when a hurricane strikes land. Yahweh used his omnipotent power to weaken the storm so that the hurricane watchers wouldn't have time to warn those of the land where the hurricane would soon arrive, those who are of the fourth seal. They wouldn't have time to prepare for the four winds, an allegory of a hurricane, of the heavens that is now strobing at night in the dark upon the great sea, just as it reads in the book of Daniel, chapter 7 and verse 2, prophecy being fulfilled. Why is that? You may be asking why. You should. And the answer is because this horse of the fourth seal is a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was death, and hell followed with him, just as it reads in Revelation chapter 6 and verse 8. Insomuch until from October the 22nd, 2013 to October the 25th, 2013, Yahweh made his whirlwind that they called a, quote, tropical storm, end quote, and then named it, quote, Lorenzo, end quote, to appear to them as only a, quote, remnant, end quote. even as it neared its target during the early hours on October 25th, 2013. The National Hurricane Center's tropical weather outlook concluded that no redevelopment of Tropical Storm Lorenzo was expected due to unfavorable conditions. However, the omnipotent mind of Yahweh, who has his way in all of his storms, again, reference Nahum chapter 1 and verse 3, took the remnant of, quote, Lorenzo, end of quote, and refueled it. And therefore, on October 27th, 2013, which was the 78th birthday anniversary of Yahweh ben Yahweh, who came out of the womb of his mother on October 27th, 1935. Coincidence? I would say not. Because that storm struck northern Europe with hurricane force winds for 2 days, causing double destruction, just as it was prayed, fulfilling Jeremiah chapter 17 and verse 18. Insomuch until the highest wind speed that was clocked in Denmark, in Europe, had recorded a wind gust of 120.8 miles per hour. Today, January 2014, if you look it up on Google and research it, it has become known to them and to the world as, quote, the St. Jude storm, end of quote. That is also known as a, quote, cyclone Christian severe European windstorm, end of quote. That also caused at least 17 deaths in Europe. And among those deaths was a 17-year-old white European teenage girl who was home in peace, sleeping in her bed, when suddenly a tree fell on her house in the dark and killed her, which is a simile from Revelation chapter 6, verse 8. Just like 17-year-old, quote, Trayvon Martin, end of quote, was on his way home to be sheltered in peace, to sleep in his bed until a, quote, tree that has the knowledge of good and evil, reference Genesis chapter 2 and verse 17, end of quote, fell on him in the dark and murdered him with a gun. I am testifying to you, O earth, that Yudhidwafa Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, sent, quote, the book of Jude, that they call, quote, St. Jude storm, the St. Jude storm, end of quote. Even as a sign did Yudhidwafa Yahweh send it to the south and to the north and to all of Europe on October 27th and the 28th of 2013. Again, on the anniversary, the 78th birthday anniversary of Yahweh ben Yahweh. That's 7 and 8. Revelation chapter 6 and verses 7 and 8. Now go and read the book of Revelation and the book of Jude in your Bibles and see who is there testifying to you. right now for yourself. I am testifying to ye that Denmark of Europe is the very same land that is bordered to the south by Germany, which is also the very same country of Northern Europe that houses the land where, quote, Robert Zimmerman Sr., end of quote, who is the father of, quote, George Zimmerman, end of quote, and his clan of relatives are originally from that land. Even a few of the, quote, Zimmermans, end of quote, who are recorded in the south of that country where they live to this very day. For behold, it is said now that wind gust of 120.8 miles per hour that struck Denmark and was clocked in Denmark of Europe on the afternoon of October the 28th, 2013, is the strongest wind speed that was ever recorded in that country's history. I am testifying to you that according to the, quote, hurricane season Atlantic Basin chart of 2013, that storm that struck Europe on October 27th and 28th, 2013, that is, in accordance with what is recorded, was the sixth hurricane of the 2013 Atlantic hurricane season. Go and look up the chart and see for yourself. Go to Google and just type in Hurricane Atlantic Season Basin Chart of 2013, whereby, quote, Tropical Storm Melissa, end of quote, reached its peak intensity on November 22nd, 2013, with winds as high as only 65 miles per hour and never reached hurricane force wind strength. There are some wise people who are watching and listening to this recorded testimony right now. You can also hear every word and see every biblical reference that is being spoken to ye at this very moment. This is your, quote, wake up call, end of quote. You'd better act on it right now before it's too late. Nevertheless, I am testifying to you that 2 Sundays ago, to date, that is, where we're now today is January 5th, 2014, I told several people in my household, where I'm at right now, and outside of this house, on that day, that an earthquake is going to be felt soon in Florida. I bear witness. Even the very next day, Monday, I told several people in the place where I'm employed that we are going to feel an earthquake even in Florida very soon, in diverse places, according to Matthew chapter 24. I also told several people of Judah this past October last year and November of 2013 that it will snow in Florida this winter, 2014. Your Bible references for these prophecies can be read in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 20, and verses 7 and 9. Make no mistake, beloved. Yudhe Bethel Sophie, Yudhe Yahweh Ben Yahweh is not, quote, dead. End of quote. Reference John chapter 10 and verse 30. Thank you for listening. Shalom Aleichem.